we got Jamie calling in from Texas. Jamie, what's going on?
Hello again, Dan, and hey, Richard. Thank you for taking my call.
Let me tell you guys about Jamie real quick. Hold on, Jamie. Let me tell you guys about Jamie real quick. I was hosting last Sunday, Talk Heathen, and Jamie called into that show, and he said he was around the Austin area, and I was like, Jamie, you should have come into the show. Like 10 minutes after the show was over, Jamie came to the studio and he met me and other people there. I think we took a picture as well. So Jamie's a real person, I found out. I assume all of you guys are real. But Jamie's a real person, and I got to meet you, and you're a lovely person. So Jamie, a pleasure talking to you now that I can put a face to the name and the voice. So anyway, thanks for calling. What can I help you with?
So, I mean, sort of around emotion, because I have very conflicted emotions about this particular subject. And let me give you a bit of context. So we, as atheists and proponents of a separation of church and state, are telling religious people, get your religion out of my laws. Thank you very much. However, I can't help but feel, and it is a visceral feeling rather than a logical one, that would it be all that bad to have it the other way? Let me give you a context. In medical ethics, you're supposed to, as far as a person is able to cognitively look after their own care decisions, do what they want. It's body autonomy. Can't force a procedure on someone that they don't want. However, a friend of mine was in a car accident back in England. He was a practicing Jehovah's Witness, and his parents as well. And his treatment and recovery were considerably hampered because of his refusal of things like blood transfusions, because it was against his religion. Now, us on our high horse of rationality know that you're making a healthcare decision that's going to impact your actual life and your actual functionality of your actual left goddamn arm based on essentially your imaginary friend. But under current paradigms of law and ethics, we allow that. Conversely, we also respect people who elect to have unnecessary things done to themselves and more pertinently their children because of religious dogma. For example, circumcision, not medically necessary, doesn't have any health benefits, we do it anyway. And so I have this cognitive conflict. I am all for personal freedom, personal choice. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, you should be able to make your own decisions. But on the other hand, these decisions aren't always completely self-contained. And if you're making a decision that has very real consequences based on very not real things, should we have authorities step in?
Yep. It's a big topic. We got into this a few weeks ago when ex-Christian Aaron was on with me. And we talked a lot about it because the story that we covered was a story that happened in Canada where basically an exorcism, quote unquote, took place. And I don't want to go into the details actually, but bad shit happens, right? Bad shit happens when you let adults touch kids, but also just like when people are mentally unwell and you are trying to give them a religious paradigm to understand their mental illness, like bad things inevitably happen. So like at what point does society need to take action and like do something about it? I don't know, man. It's like this is like one of the question of our times as we're figuring out again, as like fake shit on the internet is becoming like mainstream politics. Like how do you legislate that? How do you figure out what you can and can't tell people what to do? And I'll be honest with you, I've looked into this. I've seen other people's takes. Maybe I could look more into it. I'm not a scholar on the subject, but I have no fucking idea. I mean, like on paper, it seems like you should be able to say, well, if it affects your health or if it affects, you know, a particular view that's taught in school, but also religion affects your health, like even just psychologically, right? Like you could even make the case that like me just growing up as a Christian is passively doing damage to me, like as a person. I think that was true on some level. So like how do you legislate that? Do you get to say that no religious beliefs happen?
Mm.
But then you also can see the argument of what counts as religious belief and what just counts as a cultural belief. And like some cultural beliefs are just understood to be true that aren't have any basis at all. Does that count as a religious belief? Like it gets so much harder to really figure out. I mean, for us, it seems so simple. It's like, don't believe in this bullshit. But like you couldn't tell me that when I was a Christian, and I would necessarily agree with you. I would have to say that my beliefs gave me something, that were doing something for me, and I wasn't doing anything like, performing exorcisms on people, but it did affect my quality of life, and it did affect my treatment towards other people. Like there's
Mm.
it's one of the questions of our time. But I don't know, Rich, what do you think?
I mean, it leads to some of the same issues, but surely, like so many things, the crux of this is consent. If you're an
Yeah,
adult and you are a Jehovah's Witness and you have said, I am a Jehovah's Witness, do not give me a blood transfusion no matter what, you have consented to that. And what happens to you happens to you. But if you're
yeah,
a child about to be, say, circumcised, you cannot give
yeah.
consent. There's no
Nope,
consent there.
nope.
If you are something, I mean, there have been court cases in the UK recently where they've been trying to switch off life support systems of children because the parents won't give the consent, and that child is suffering. And they've been long and drawn out and difficult court cases with lots of emotional turmoil on both sides because the
Yeah,
parents don't want to let go, understandably. Um, and at the same time, the doctors want to do what's probably best for the child and let the child
yeah.
go because it's poor kids might be in pain. Um, but yeah, I think if there's anything we can start with, it must be consent. It must be you deciding what you want done with your body, which is a very, very
Hmm.
thorny issue in the States, I realize right now. But
Yeah.
that's where we start. It does, of course, get more tricky when it's hang on, but if this person is injured, then that has a knock-on effect and harms people around them and all this kind of ethical thing. But surely consent is where we begin with this
Yeah.
stuff, with this kind of stuff.
I think that's a good point. I think
You know.
I'm obviously catastrophizing it to like the worst possible outcomes because it literally happens every day. But like you do have to start somewhere. And I guess it is this really nebulous idea of consent because like there's even
Mm,
questions today about like, okay, does an 18-year-old have just as much consent as a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old? Like, I would argue, no, I wasn't as cognizant when I was 18 as I am now, or what about, in other I mean, obviously there's a million situations you can come up with this, but like,
Mm.
and you've already mentioned some of them, that being in a family
yeah.
situation where somebody's making decisions for you, like suddenly you lack a will to do anything, because we've arbitrarily assigned, this number that says, oh, you're 18 now. Now your brain is developed enough the
Mm,
day of your birthday to make decisions. Like, no, we just had to pick a number, and that was like kind of the best one that we thought of. So it's like, human beings are fucked. That's my conclusion. But also, um, like I I guess the best way is just prevention. And when I say prevention, I mean really teaching people critical thinking, really teaching people the tools to think about this stuff and why it could be good or
mm,
bad. Because at least Christianity in the United States still has privileged opinions on what they think is best for people, including whether or not they can get abortions, whether or not they can get proper mental health care treatment, and whether or not in some places they can get fucking blood transfusions, which is just ridiculous. That there should certainly, if we're
mm,
going to organize a society in any way, it shouldn't be because we think we're going to do what's best for the Christians. We should be what's best for all human interests. But
mm.
Mm.
I'm just speaking to the choir here. I mean, I know you know that, Jamie.
Yeah, so I'll wrap up because I know that your tempest refuses to stop fugating. So I'll wrap this up. I am content to go with the consent as a sort of starting point, and as long as we can get the sort of overt religiousness out of law, fine. I can content myself that we don't put in a bunch of other arbitrary, this, because, like I say, humans are fucked. We're only developed at the age of 25, but these decisions need to be made much earlier, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So I suppose it
Yeah.
just comes down to we can't litigate against it, but we should try and educate against it, and hopefully we can turn everyone into a reasonable thinking being who doesn't think it's a good idea to mutilate a child's penis because their imaginary sky daddy said so. The end.
Yeah, I know it's very bleak, but you're right. I mean, like, what can we do as individual citizens? I guess I make this joke, I think, every week, but start call-in shows. Obviously, call-in shows are the most effective form of activism you could possibly
Yeah.
do. There's nothing better. It is the best. So if you haven't yet, start a call-in show. But thank you, Jamie. I appreciate you calling in. And again, cool that I got to meet you in real life. I don't often get to meet callers in real life, so it's very fun. Rich, did you have any more you want to say on that subject?
No, not really. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like I say, it's a very sticky subject and very, very fraught with emotions that can't be extracted from it. We can say, let's have a nice logical talk about the child on a ventilator, but it's not going to happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rich, do you get tired of hearing the word emotions? Because that's like every day for you, right?
It is not really. Although when you're writing a book about it, trying to find this, I probably have a huge thesaurus obsession with trying to find other words that mean emotion when I'm writing, because you end up with
That's
sentences with
fair.
emotion in it 8 times. Oh,
Well,
emotions,
I'm just thinking,
passions,
like, that's a
feelings.
word that's right. If we made a word cloud for this episode, like, that would be the one. And I'm just like, gosh, what is this
Yeah.
guy doing every day? Doing your distinguished professorship things, whatever you distinguished professors do. And you probably just hear that a lot. So I don't know. But